Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Lynn. I am the social media manager over at Muse Group, and I am also the founder of the food blog Serendipity by Sarah Lynn. And today I am going to be teaching you beginner food photography. So this class will be focused on food, but all of the skills that I am going to be teaching you today can also be applied to product photography or really any kind of still life photography. So if you are a small business owner who wants to be able to help out your social media team, or if you're just looking to get into food photography as a hobby, or maybe you want to start a blog, this class is a great start. One quick note that I want to mention is that this will not teach you how to use a camera. So it's really going to be focused on techniques and composition, but there are plenty of online tutorials that will teach you how to use your specific cameras. So if you are looking for tips, be sure to go to YouTube and look up your camera brand. However, the techniques that I'm going to be teaching you today will work for both cameras and phones, so you don't need any special equipment to get started. On that note, I'm going to turn off my face. I'm going to turn on my slides and we will go ahead and get started. All right, any minute now. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize my face because no one wants to see that. Perfect. Okay. So as I said, this class is for very beginners and you don't need any special materials unless you want to take some notes. Then go ahead and grab a pen and a notebook. Otherwise, these slides are just going to have a lot of information, and I've even created a PDF version for you to download so you can follow along or look over later if you would like to. In today's class, we are going to start by talking about different photography styles, what that involves, and how to find your personal photography style. From there, we'll move on to lighting and how to achieve perfect lighting wherever you are taking photos. And then we will talk about the 3 most common photography angles, which is overhead, 45-degree, and straight on. After, we'll go over 3 basic photography techniques, including the rule of thirds, lines, and shapes and patterns. Next, we'll go over color theory, and lastly, I'll give you a bonus tip on adding human elements to your photos. So let's start with photography style. Photography style is basically the consistent look you go for in each and every photo that you take. There are many photography styles, which we will go over, but style itself involves a lot of different things, including the type of lighting you use, whether you use lots of color or keep it more monotone, if your photos have more of a cozy, warm tone, or if they're kind of sleek and cool toned. Style can also include if photos are very detailed or if they're more minimal, and it can even get into the types of props you use, the photography angles you like, if you prefer close-up shots, or if you like entire scenes, and more. So these are 3 examples of photography styles, and they are just 3 of many, but it gives you an idea of the different styles that are out there. So you'll see the photo on the left, it's pretty bright and happy. We have lots of colors in there with the pinks and the oranges and even little pops of green. The photo in the middle is going to be a little bit more cozy and moody, some more muted colors. It's very serene. And then the photo on the right is very dark and bold, and you know, you feel like you're in a whiskey lounge. And I mean, basically what you want to do is play around with the different styles and really figure out what is your personal style. So the first way that we can do this is by asking ourselves, how do I want my audience to feel when they see my photos? For me personally, I go with kind of a light and moody style, and I want my viewers to feel like they are cooking in their kitchen, it's a rainy weekend, they're wearing a sweater, and they feel cozy and happy and relaxed. And that is just my personal brand style, but for you, your style is going to be whatever you want it to be and however you want your audience to feel. Okay, so how to find your personal style. So to find your style, start by collecting food photos in magazines, check out other food photographers on Instagram, search for food photography on Pinterest and find the photos that really grab you and speak to you and make you think, wow, I really, really wish that I took this photo. Just start collecting those photos on your phone or on a dream board, whatever you like, and then notice the similarities between each of the photos that you absolutely love. Are they detailed or are they minimal? What kind of lighting did the photographer use? What angle was the photo taken at? What colors are in the photos? Are they close up or far away? What props did the photographers use? And on and on and on. And then you will want to start using these techniques in your own photos and start developing your own personal style. Now, keep in mind that this does not mean that you should copy other photographers, because that is definitely frowned upon. But it's okay to start incorporating these general techniques into your photos while also adding your own unique spin. Okay, now let's get into lighting. There is so much that goes into lighting, but today we are going to keep it simple and go over natural soft light. Some food photographers use artificial light, but it requires quite a lot of equipment and space, and I personally just love the look of natural light. It's really what I'm familiar with, so that's what we're going to go over today. I almost never use artificial light because I just don't love how it looks in my personal food photography, but if you're into it, again, there's so many good tutorials online, so feel free to check those out on YouTube and get into it if that's what you want to get into. Now, real quick, we're gonna talk about hard light versus soft light. So hard light is going to be what you see in the photo on the right. And hard light is when we take photos in direct sunlight and the shadows are very harsh, we have bright highlights, and everything is gonna be really dramatic and contrasted. On the left, you're going to see soft light or diffuse light, which is what we get when we take photos on a cloudy day. So when clouds cover the sun, the clouds diffuse the sunlight, which gives us very milky highlights and soft shadows, and everything is just a little bit more balanced. Hard light is definitely a style of food photography. Wow, I can talk, it's fine. But it can be very artsy and cool. So if you are into it, by all means, go for hard light photography. But more often, food photography is going to be taken in soft light, and every photo in this presentation, except the photo on the right, obviously, is going to be using soft light. So that's what we're going to get into today. So I know what you're thinking. Okay, well, I take photos inside, there's no sunlight. How do I get diffuse natural light? Well, the easiest way we can do this is to take photos on a cloudy day. Now, if you live in Nevada like me, you know that we pretty much get sun 360 days of the year. So if you're only going to be taking photos on cloudy days, you're gonna have like 5 days of the year to take photos, and that's unrealistic. If you were to live somewhere like the Pacific Northwest, you might be able to get away with only shooting photos on cloudy days, but that's not going to work for most of us. So today we're going to talk about how to create soft light in your own home with almost no materials. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is find a window in your home that has nice bright light shining through it. And for me, the best light is in my bedroom, which is why you see my setup next to my bed. And the light will shine differently depending on what direction the light is coming from. So the light coming from a north-facing window will look different than the light coming from a south-facing window. And just play around with it, find the light that you like best, and this may take a bit of time and practice. It definitely did for me. Just be patient and see what looks best. And if you're in a restaurant or something, definitely make sure to take photos by a nice bright window. Also, this is very important. Turn off any artificial lights in your house. We only want one natural light source, so we don't want any artificial light, or it will create a weird glow and completely ruin the photo. So just make sure all your lamps and lights are off, and make sure to cover up any other windows in the room. So if you're looking at my photography setup above, you'll notice that I closed the window directly in front of me because I only want light coming from the one window. Next, you're going to want to place a table right next to your window, and the closer you get to the window, the brighter the light will be. The farther away, the less light you'll have. I have this custom photography table that my brother built for me, but up until he made it for me, I just used a folding table or a coffee table, whatever I had around. And then if you want to use any backgrounds, you'll want to set those up. If you're looking for backgrounds, there are many ways to go about this. You can buy them online or use whatever you have around the house. I actually make my own with paint and spackle and wooden boards, and there's a lot of tutorials for how to do this online, but you actually don't need any backgrounds if you don't want to spend any money. When I first started, I used a marble pastry board, my coffee table. I also used tablecloths, neutral colored walls in my house, or anything else I could find. So just play around with what you have and see what you like and what fits your style. After you place your table by the window with all of your backdrops, you may see that you have some very hard direct light on your table. It's going to be very bright and we want to create soft light. So we will want to diffuse the light coming through the window. Again, the natural way to get diffused light would be to shoot on a cloudy day, but if we don't have clouds, we need to use something that will mimic clouds. I personally use a diffuser, which is what you see in the window, and it's just a sheer circle of cloth that essentially acts like a cloud and diffuses the light that comes through the window. Of course, you don't have to buy a diffuser. If you are looking for a free version, you can just use sheer white curtains, a white bed sheet, a white shower curtain, or you can also just use parchment paper taped to your window. Anything that is white and still translucent, but lets light through the window will work. And when those materials are over the window, your light will become very soft and beautiful. Sometimes if the light is directly over your roof, the light will be diffused enough that you don't need a diffuser, but it's always a good idea to have these materials just in case you need them. Now we'll go over bounce boards real quick. Bounce boards are cloth boards that look like the diffuser in my window. They're white or black, and they either reflect light or shadows onto our scenes. So I have actual bounce boards, but I was using them for something else in this photo. So instead I used poster boards from Target that were like 30 cents. And we use the white bounce board when we have intense black shadows on our subject and we want them to be lighter. And all we do is place the white board on the shadowy side of our subject, which will be opposite of our window like you see in the photo. And the white bounce board will take in all the light from the window and reflect it onto the shadowy side of our subject. A black bounce board is going to do the exact opposite. If we have a very bright light and there's no shadows, it's going to make our object look flat in photos instead of 3D. So to fix this, we will put a black bounce board on the shadowy side of our subject, and the black is going to suck in all the light from the window and reflect shadows onto our subject. Now, you may not always need bounce boards depending on your style. I actually almost never use them, but when I do need them, they're really helpful. So I would just always make sure to have a black and white poster board on hand. I actually prefer foam core when I can get it because they are easier to stand up, but any kind of white or black paper, even construction paper would work. I know that I just gave you a ton of information on light, but good lighting is really probably the most important way to get good photos, so there is a lot involved. But if you're looking for more information on how to achieve nice lighting, I have a couple of videos attached from another food photographer who I really trust, and I've linked those in the PDF, so feel free to check out those videos if you need some more info, or you're always free to ask me any questions on Instagram or through my email address. And one last quick note before we move on. As you can see from my photo setup, this is nothing fancy. You really don't need a lot of equipment to have a food photography studio, and it can get, I mean, way more involved than this, but it doesn't have to. So just use what you have and get creative. And I mean, I've been doing food photography for at least 5 years, and I just recently started to upgrade to actual photography equipment. So don't worry if your food photography studio is a little bit homemade. Okay, so let's get into some of the fun stuff, starting with photography, angles, and when to use each one. The 3 basic angles we are going to go over today are overhead, which is a 90-degree bird's eye view of your subject. And then we're going to talk about straight-on photos, which would be a 0-degree shot that is level with your subject. And lastly, we'll talk about the 45-degree angle, which is obviously in between the two, and it's going to show both the top and the sides of your food. Okay, so the overhead angle is when we are directly over our subject. So our camera is going to be parallel with the surface we are shooting on. And we want to use this angle anytime we're shooting foods that are flat, such as salads, cookies, anything in a dish like a casserole or a bowl of soup. We can also use this the overhead angle to set a scene, like if we were going to do a Thanksgiving dinner scene or a dinner party, anything where we want to tell a story and have every element shown. We also use it for tablescapes to show all of the elements on the table, and that just helps us tell a story about what's going on in the photo, so it's really great for storytelling. And it's also perfect for prep shots because you can really show a detailed shot of all the ingredients and what the cook is doing with those ingredients. Next is the 45-degree angle, where you can see the sides and the top of the food. The 45-degree angle is very common in food photography, especially commercial food photography, because it's seen as more of an intimate angle that makes you feel like you're sitting down, like about to eat a plate of food. It's also great because it shows every aspect of the dish and it creates depth in a photo so nothing will ever look flat. And lastly, it's great because it shows off textures and layers in the scene. The last angle we're going to go over is the straight on shot, which is where your camera is directly in line with your subject. So if you can imagine your camera perpendicular against your photo surface, and we're going to use this angle for anything tall like cocktails, a burger, a stack of pancakes, anything tall where we're trying to get all of the layers involved in the photo. And this angle is also great for any kind of action shot, like if we were going to pour a drink into a glass, or if we want to sprinkle herbs on top of a finished dish. Now keep in mind, these are not all hard and fast rules. While you should try to get different angles of every dish and use angles that make sense with the foods that you are shooting, angles are definitely a style element as well as a rule. So I personally prefer overhead shots. It's just what I'm drawn to, and I think it fits my style and it helps me personally tell a story. So I always get at least one, if not many, overhead shots when I do a photo shoot, but I always try to get different angles on each dish so that I can get diversity in my photos as well. Especially, for example, if I'm shooting a picture of a cocktail, it doesn't make sense for me to only get overhead shots because cocktails are in glasses, and we want to make sure to get straight on and 45-degree angle photos so that we are showing off every element of the cocktail. Now let's talk about our 3 easy compositional techniques, starting with the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds states that when a photo is broken up into thirds using a 4-grid line, like you see in this photo, the main element of our photo should be placed in one of those junctions or intersecting points. The reason we use the rule of thirds is because our eye naturally goes right to those junction points, and by putting our subject on those points, we create a dynamic and interesting photo. So when we are putting a photo together, we want to imagine this grid over our scene, and we want to place our main subject right in one of those 4 intersections on the grid. As you can see, my main subject is the bowl on the bottom, and it's in the lower right intersection. And then I was even able to place another bowl in the upper left intersection to create a really strong composition in my photo. Now, we don't always have to use the intersections. We can also use the lines as a guide as to where to put our subject. And that can be very visually appealing. So in this photo, I placed the pretzels in the 2 sections on the left, and it just makes the photo a little more interesting than if I filled the whole board with pretzels. You could also, for example, place like a stack of cookies in the very middle of the 2 vertical lines, and that would work as well. So really just play around and get creative with the rule of thirds because it's really quite easy to use and it can instantly improve a photo. And actually, if you're shooting on an iPhone and even on some cameras, you can turn this grid on your camera so you can see the grid while you're taking a photo, and you don't even have to imagine it. You can just use the grid on your viewfinder to compose your photo. Now let's talk about lines. So we use lines in food photography to guide the viewer's eye through the photo and make it more interesting. What we do is use props or food to create lines in our photo that point directly to our main subject. So in this photo, I used the napkin, the chopsticks, and the plates of food to point directly at the middle plate of fried rice. A quick tip for lines is that you don't want props or food going in the same direction. So in this photo, you can see that the chopsticks, for example, are going in 2 different directions. And we wouldn't want them going in the same direction because it's just not visually appealing and it makes the photo look a little bit off. So always just double check that any lines are going in different directions while still pointing towards the subject that is taking, that is like center stage. And you also want to take the viewer through different elements of the photo while using lines. Shapes and patterns. Okay, so shapes and patterns are an easy way to add a lot of interest and texture to a photo. And we do this by using similar shapes, which in this photo would be circles. and just creating a pattern throughout our photo. And as you can see in this photo, I mimicked the shape of the cookies and the circular plates and the circular metal bowl thingy and the tea diffuser, which just makes the photo really solidly visually appealing. And then lastly, I placed the cookies and the other subjects on a rectangular piece of parchment paper, which just adds another interesting geometric element, and it kind of frames the cookies and adds more layers, which we always want to do in food photography. So don't be afraid to use different shapes in the same photo. Just don't go too crazy and have like 4 or 5 different shapes. Just stick to 1 or 2, maybe 3 tops, and try to create unique patterns and shapes wherever you can. Now let's get into color, which I love talking about. Color not only affects the mood of a photo and how people feel about it, but we can also manipulate color and use certain colors together to create a harmonious, balanced photo. Color can be a really fun and in-depth subject, but we will keep it simple today by just talking about analogous versus complementary colors. Analogous colors are any 3 colors that are side by side on the color wheel, like yellow, green, and orange. Analogous color schemes are very visually appealing and comfortable to the eye. And when we pick an analogous color scheme, we want one of the colors to be the star of the show, and the other 2 colors should be supporting actors. Complementary colors, on the other hand, are 2 colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So for example, red and green. Complementary colors are more contrasted and interesting to the eye. So sometimes they can look a little crazy, but we can use complementary colors in a way where it's really beautiful and balanced rather than chaotic. We can either do this by adding neutral colors such as white, beige, or gray, or we can choose one complementary color as our star and the other as a supporting actor. So for example, if we're looking at this first photo of the blueberry lemon cocktail, we see that we have some purples, magentas, and some greens and yellows in this photo. If we look at the color wheel, green and yellow are opposite of purple and magenta, which is why this photo works so well together. In the middle photo, we're using an analogous color scheme with a bright orange as our star color and some yellows and reddish oranges as our supporting actors. Orange, yellow, and red are next to each other on the color wheel, which makes this photo very nice and easy to look at. And then in the last photo, we have a more subtle complementary photo color scheme where I use a blue pie dish to offset the oranges and the caramel drizzle. And then to support the color scheme, I use a gray background and white props, which just balances out the photo. Now, if you are really obsessed with color and you want to go crazy with it, you don't want to be subtle, by all means go for it and just see what happens. I really think color can be very eye-catching, and it's definitely a style element that you should have some fun with and make your own. Okay, so the last bonus tip I want to talk about is human elements. Human elements are so important in food photography because ultimately food brings people together across all cultures. Adding a human element really helps people connect not only to your photo, but to you as a person. And people like seeing other people, and adding a human element can really add a lot of depth and help you tell your story through your photo. And there are a lot of ways you can do this, either by showing a prep shot like in the middle, adding a drizzle in the photo, or just showing something, like showing something off, like holding something like in the photo on the right. You could also show someone cutting into their dish or taking a bite of their food, which can add a lot of movement and create that kind of intimate moment in your photo. Ultimately, when people look at our photos, we want them to feel like they are sitting at our table dining with us, and adding a human element is a really easy way to do that. Okay, that is all I have for you today, but thank you so much for taking my course. I really hope you learned something and you're ready to start applying these skills to your own food photography. If you're interested in seeing more of my work, you can visit my website at serendipitybysaralyn.com, or you can find me on Facebook and Instagram under the same name. If you're interested in working with me, or if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me at hello@serendipitybysaralyn.com, or you can always DM me on Instagram. Again, thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.